Joe Coffin.
Joe Coffin?
Yeah. In that, so again, I'll just leave it back to the commission. If there are some specific questions, Tenny Maker is here, and he can address any questions you may have.
Before we make Tenny come up to the mic, does anybody have any specific questions of Tenny?
Not yet.
Okay, well, it may be helpful. Tenny, why don't you go ahead and come to the mic, identify yourself for the record since we are live here.
City Maker, Public Works Director, City of Guthrie.
Okay. And I'm sure the other commissioners feel a little like I do, or a little overwhelmed at all of the printed material that was provided to us.
Which we appreciate.
And we do appreciate that. I appreciate you everybody getting this to us. I believe I had been told that Joe Coffin was actually going to be here this evening. I don't see Joe.
He could not make it.
He couldn't make it this evening.
And perhaps, he said that he would perhaps try to be up here for a city council meeting
Okay.
on our follow-up after our meeting, I guess.
And Tenny, can you confirm with us? I mean, and I already know this to be the fact that the city has, at our request, consulted with Mr. Coffin, who is a landscape architect. I don't believe his landscape architect licensure is actually current, but he has people in his firm that if it were required for a stamp, it's available. And is that correct? The city has conferred?
Yes,
with
Myers Engineering and Joe both had met.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Tenny?
I guess one question that I have for Tenny, I do know that on the placement of the gazebos, Tenny, that Joe Coffin had strongly suggested that gazebo be placed on the other side of the pond, you know, near the dam that walks over to the bridge, and I wondered if there was any, what if any were the reasons that couldn't be placed there?
Well, originally we had 5 in the plan, and we just scaled it back to 3. Mm-hmm. Looking in funding reasons to try to get us within budget. I mean, could one be placed over there? Sure, if funds were available.
What would be the added cost to putting one over there?
We're currently out for bid right now with those. I don't know what the bids are going to come in like for the gazebos.
Oh, we haven't ordered the gazebos yet.
We have not ordered the gazebos yet. No, we haven't even received bids yet on them.
So that might be a possibility still, if under recommendation. Okay.
And just for clarification, Mr. Chappell, were you talking about moving one of these gazebos to the other side of the pond?
Joe, when he made his presentation to the council, thought that we're putting a new road over there, correct? And that in thinking of expanding the visual aspect of the park to include is that the south side? I get lost in my directions in there.
I'd say it'd be west. I would call it west.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. West.
It's mostly west.
Yeah.
Mostly west, but to have a water feature with a gazebo on the other side and having a new road that goes over there, and then also having that earthen dam that would make it accessible to the bathroom. I also saw that there was a proposal or conceptual ideal to maybe build a bridge across the pond at some point, and it just seemed like to me with the existing road that we have that can be walked across, and then if we did have a gazebo in that flat space over there, that earthen dam there would be another way to access that. There would be 2 ways to access the park without going to the expense of having a bridge sort of to nowhere, perhaps. But anyway, I hadn't heard about the bridge till I saw it in the plan here. But that would be. I also went to the park today, and standing in the existing pavilion, looking off to the west, that could be a spectacular view of the pond and the gazebo over there. And then my other thought about the gazebos all being sort of placed in the center of the park. Center of the park, because of the things that, in my opinion, the center of the park is getting pretty full. We're losing, and two, in order to protect the trees, the additional sidewalk that's going to another gazebo, the foundation that will impact the trees. I know that the city, I've got the report here somewhere. You know I do, Tenny. I bring all my paperwork. That the gentleman from the Logan County Extension said that cover any area with an impermeable layer will stress the trees. So if we could move a gazebo and the sidewalks that are going to it to the other side of the pond, that would be another way to protect those historical trees there. And if you're having people in gazebos having their separate functions, it just makes sense to have them as far away from each other as possible, I would think. You've got one gazebo, and then another 100 feet, you've got another one. It would be nice to have it just extends the park to the other side. And I know that Joe strongly recommended that, so if that would be a possibility. The other issue that I have, and I know that so much of the construction has started down there, or at least the dirt work has started. It seems like to me, when I drove through the park this morning, that and I know that we've gotten rid of the parking further along on the north side of the park when you first pull in. It seems like that extensive, it still seems like an extraordinary amount of parking. And I do know that we had talked maybe about the possibility of having parking across the road dam, like near behind the water treatment plant. It just seems like that stretch of parking when you first pull in is still really extensive. I don't know how many parking places are there. Do you, Tenny, know that first section there, how many parking spots?
About 15, it looks like.
About 15.
Yeah. If you look on page 5 of 31, it'll show you.
Yeah, it's 15.
What page?
5 of 31.
I will say, though, Joe, I mean, yes, I see that where you're coming from as far as it looks extensive, but it's currently there, just as not as paved. But what they did take out is a nice, long area, which I think some of that dirt there, I say dirt there, I don't know why that dirt there's for, but nonetheless, I think that being able to grass over that area where it says currently existing gravel on the demolition plan, you can
And
see
is
where they're
that
going
a-
to
is
take
that
all
a
that
plan
out.
there under those trees to add?
Yes, from the end
Once the
of,
parking stops.
yeah, everything from the end of that, where that 15th parking space is right there, currently is still, it's kind of a gravel surface that continues on down here towards the tennis court area. Every bit of that gravel, hard surface stuff that people's been parking on, we're removing that and going back in with topsoil.
Okay.
So,
And that may make a difference. And it may just driving through now, it may look like there's more parking there than there really is. It's hard to tell where where it stops.
It
But
probably
it looks like
does.
it's stopping right at the playground, and that makes sense.
We've got quite a bit tore up right now because we've been putting in the sewer line that comes across there, trying to get it installed prior to any of the contractors mobilizing to even do the paving or concrete for the sidewalk.
So most of where the one parking lot on the north end there is going is already gravel, correct?
Yeah, that's,
And Joe, even though gravel's not completely impermeable, it's not near as permeable as grass or soil is, so
Well, but
it's not like a huge difference going from
this
gravel.
parking lot back, though behind the tennis court and stuff, that's gonna be blacktop, is it not?
The parking right there by the tennis court will be blacktop. If you
Yeah.
go to page 4 of 31, which is the
I'm not seeing the page numbers.
They're way down the
bottom
bottom
right-hand
right.
corner.
Bottom right-hand
Okay,
corner.
thank you.
Tony, you want to borrow my
Page 4
readers?
of 31 kind of shows more in detail on the demolition plan. What I was saying of all the existing gravel that's gonna be removed. And people parking and driving on that for as many
And,
years as they
honestly,
have,
looking
it's
at it here, it doesn't
probably,
look like there's, when I drove through today, it just looked like that parking was going way down, and on here, it doesn't look quite as much.
yeah.
So yeah, if you'll compare page 4 to 5, you do get to see the drastic difference on that side by how much more grass is going in.
And, and part of the reason I brought that up, I know that when the plan was first brought to us, that was one of our concerns, and I knew that the park board
Yes.
also, that was one of their concerns, and that's why I brought it up. But I certainly appreciate the move to the back, and
I'll say
Yeah.
part of that move, and then the change that we did over here with the parking, that's directly in front of the existing pavilion, the big pavilion where we've got it back to back, that was all recommendation by Joe. Before in the, plan, we had the one long strip that cut right through the middle of the park there. There was concern of people being able to look from the highway to see down through the park. That was his recommendation, was to make that 2 sets of parking that's back to back there instead of one long strip down through the middle of the park.
all righty.
Can you give us just an overall summary of what's happening, what we're all looking at here?
Okay, currently, city staff has got, there's a water line that's came in off of Division. We've got that installed and all the way over here to the splash pad. We've got the sewer line installed all the way across, and on the other side of the parking to this manhole, all of the subgrade work is already cut in for the parking, and we've kind of broke the sidewalk in 2 phases so that we can get the sidewalk that's adjacent to all the parking in place, let that contractor mobilize. His plan is to mobilize Monday. Met with him today. We've got the subgrade work all done for the playground surface, both playground surfaces, and the subgrade work all done for the splash pad area. To this point, that's pretty much, other than all the demo of removing the old basketball courts and stuff like that. But to this point, that's kind of where we're at with the project.
Okay. And it looks like on this plan too, on the parking near the basketball court, it looks like there's a couple of breaks in the parking where you're like saving a tree.
Those are to go around trees, yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I just tell you, I appreciate all the work that the city's done in accommodating, and I know this has been a little bit of a bone of contention over the last year. I'd sure like to see us come together on it. And I know there's always some sentiment, gee, we really like Mineral Wells Park, but I can tell you, I've had more than one person say, it's looking kind of ratty, the playground equipment's coming apart, they'd sure like to see it updated, and obviously, this brings us into the 21st century on that. Do we have any public comments? Anybody from the public want to comment on the park plans before we move on?
there is one more thing I'd like to say that's not necessarily on these plans that's real clear. All on page 5 of 31, if you look at that, in front of the existing pavilion, it was that last minute change with that parking lot, changing that parking right there. It didn't get removed off of here, but the existing asphalt that goes around the, there's a little drinking fountain there that's sandstone drinking fountain.
Right.
That will not, that, we've already removed all that existing asphalt that makes that little circle around all that. So that's all gonna be put back in as just topsoil and grass.
Okay, that's great.
That will be one road that comes around there that goes between them two parking places and cuts
Okay.
back out. So, again, that was some of Joe's recommendations to kind of clean all that up and define it a little bit instead of just having it.
It looked like a European freak. You didn't know which way to go when you got there.
Hopefully, it'll clean it all up
Yeah.
and get that a little bit more uniform and cleaned up for us.
All right.
Any other questions?
I think if I could have 2 cents.
You can have 3.
Joe, I agree with you. I mean, I went by the park after I'd visited the park with you earlier today as well, and I could be persuaded either way with that third gazebo in the center. My preference would be that that gazebo be taken across the pond and done over there, just simply because I feel like with all of this sidewalk that's going in there, that you're taking all the grass away for the kids to kick a ball. I mean, it's just, sidewalk is interrupting every large patch of grass we have. If the kids want to play kickball or throw a football, I mean, they've got a sidewalk they've got to contend with.
Well, and the other thing too is that, you know, growing up in Guthrie and spending time in that park, like I'm sure you did, the biggest, coolest part of that park was that expanse of trees and grass, and one gazebo and the playground to me is plenty, and then it would get rid of some of the sidewalk that needed to be there. And being across the pond, if you go in that gazebo and you're standing there and you're looking across the park, to imagine the pond with that gazebo back there would be a spectacular view.
Oh,
With the
absolutely.
2 gazebos in the center of the park, which is going to be more crowded than ever, it just seems like a perfect, and we're going to have a new road going back there. It would be a more private place for a family together, not 100 feet away from another gazebo. That, and since Joe thought it was such a good idea, and if there was a financial restriction, you know, there's some of us that could help raise money to, you know.
Well, if you were to just simply
Donate
take
to the
one
park.
gazebo and move it from there to over there, I don't understand, I don't know what financial restriction that would be.
I don't either.
I mean, I don't know if
Just for
these-
clarity, can everyone turn to page 12 of 31? I think that gets a lot of the peripheral stuff out of our vision, and you can clearly see where the 3 octagonal
Yes.
gazebos are showing to be placed right now. Joe, which gazebo are you talking about possibly moving? The one in
You know, honestly, it looks like to me the one that would be, it looks like the one to move would be the one closest to the pavilion, because the other one has such good access to the parking. You see
The one in the center, Joe, label them, left, right, center, which one?
far right.
Okay, so you're.
That one should stay. The
That one
one
should
up
stay.
close, see, look at all the sidewalk you could lose there if that one wasn't there.
Yes,
Oh,
See
okay.
that?
the center one.
And the other one has easy access from the parking right there on the south.
Okay, so you're talking, of the 3 gazebos, you're talking about
Middle.
moving the center
far-
one.
No, the far right one.
You're getting us
Oh.
confused.
I'm sorry.
Okay, he is talking about moving the center one across the, across
That's
the
correct.
thing.
Okay.
But the benefits of the one on the right being close to
To
the
this
parking
parking.
and
Easy-
the other
Yeah,
sport courts.
easy access and, yes, sorry.
So if the center one were moved, I think he's also saying that that big loop of sidewalk that goes over to that center one could also be
Could be-
eliminated.
yeah, and then you've got a big green space between the pavilion and the playground,
Yes,
uninterrupted.
yes.
While maintaining ADA accessibility
Yes,
to
while
all the
maintaining-
features
yes.
and the parking.
Because if you took
And to the
that, if you
playground.
took that sidewalk that comes off of that north parking and just make an L shape to the right, to the park, to the playground, and then you could cut it off right there where it starts to circle around to the right, cut it off, you cut it off all the way to the next parking lot, because that parking lot already has an access point to the parking, to the playground equipment there as well.
Yes,
So you could take off that whole loop of sidewalk
yes.
as well as that gazebo, and you would have a much more expansive grass
Area.
field for kids to kick a
And
ball.
you're still going to have a nice one too, on this side where there's no parking. This will be a good
Right.
grassy area there as well.
That one's definitely filled with more trees, so you wouldn't be able to kick a ball around as much.
Yes, but-
This space is grass currently.
It is.
It holds grass. It's green. I mean, it's not green right now, but it's got grass on it. It would hold more area that's uninterrupted by trees and/or by playground equipment or sidewalk or anything.
Yes,
You know, as a mother and now as a grandmother, it's really important to have an area without too many sidewalks, because when you have toddlers or young ones, sidewalks, parking lots, they're, you know, those are stitches waiting to happen. So I think it's important to eliminate all of the sidewalks that we can. It makes it safer for those children playing in the park.
and it expands it will expand the park to have that over there. It's like we'll have Pavilion Row. That could be Pavilion Street. You know, you go back to the old one, which you go back to look at. There's nothing to do once you get there except admire the old architecture. Then you would have that one next to that earthen dam. Over time, we could, you know, put some railing on that earthen dam, make it an attractive feature to walk across. People could circle that area and get back into the park. There would be over the low water crossing and then go back to that dam, to the bathroom. It would just expand the park to the west,
Yes,
southwest.
southwest.
This will be a bit of a challenge, but do you want to try to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I think I
Okay.
could do
Well, I
that.
think,
Do we need more discussion?
well, I've got a third sense that I want to share.
Okay.
You know, and I don't know where we're at in the process. It may be too late, but if it's not too late, I think that it's important, if you're sticking with a period park, I think these sidewalks would be made with bricks. I'm not proposing bricks, but I think the concrete should be stained and stamped to reflect a brick sidewalk,
That would be nice.
Amen. If possible. I mean, I don't know where they're at in the process, but if possible, that's what I think that it would be
Well,
much more
and,
appealing.
and I don't know, Tenny, maybe if you're eliminating,
He already said his answer.
if we're eliminating this one loop of sidewalk, that might allow enough more in the budget to stamp the rest of the sidewalk. Could still be concrete, because I know,
Absolutely concrete. I mean, that's
Yeah.
going to be more durable
Right.
and stay ADA
but
accessible.
it's stamped and stained.
But it's,
I
if
don't
we're
know.
going to stick with a historic park, a period park, it would have been made with brick if any sidewalk was there.
It wouldn't have been concrete.
It wouldn't have been concrete, no,
No,
for
it
sure. And I
wouldn't
think that now, granted, now, absolutely make it with concrete, but I think that we have the tools available to us to make it appear aesthetically look more period.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I do know the contractor's supposed to mobilize again. This project has been awarded to contractors. We've scaled it way back from the original plan already once with the contractor. You know, if we was to take it back, I don't know what it'd do to cut quantities again. What that contractor would come back and say, hey, you know, I just can't come up here and mobilize and do that for that little amount of concrete. I don't know that.
But also, there would be need, there might be the need to put concrete at the other gazebo. I mean, there's going to be concrete there.
We would have to just look at, quantity wise to see what the quantities we cut out of it from if that one gazebo was moved to what quantities comparison it would be, because we'd have to have the sidewalk going over there, because being federal funds, you have to be ADA compliant.
Right.
I mean, that's just part of the grant process. And again, this has been approved through council. I don't know whether we'd have to probably take it back for approval again with the changes, or I don't know whether what that actual contractor would even come back to us and say. Because, I mean, we've awarded the bid to that contractor for a set quantity. And we've already cut his contract down about by half. Gazebos haven't been ordered at this point. They're out for bid right now, so.
You have a motion?
Yeah, I have a motion.
Okay.
I have a motion to give a certificate of approval to the plan contingent upon, and of course I know this can be appealed to council.
Sure.
Contingent upon of moving the gazebo to the west side of the pond and losing, just moving it from the middle one.
The middle gazebo.
The middle gazebo to the other side. And as said, if the city staff or Leroy has an objection to that, he can certainly appeal it to council.
May I?
Mr. Olson, absolutely. I was
Yeah.
going to ask before we even see if there's a second on that. Do you?
What I'd like to respectfully suggest is, we did visit with the landscape architect, and we took the majority of his recommendations. Our thoughts were going from 5 to 3 gazebos. We've always looked at the other side of the park, the water, as a phase 2. And that's what our intent is, to come back and develop that as phase 2. Our request tonight from staff is to approve the project as presented. It's already been before the city council and approved, and the contract's been awarded. I don't know that it's in the scope of your authority to design a project. It's to respond if it's compatible historically or not. So I'm not sure that you're within your scope of authority changing the plans if it already meets compatibility for the historic district. So those are some of my thoughts on the project. But I don't think we have to appeal it to the city council again, because they've already approved it.
Well, did the city council issue a certificate of approval for the project?
Don't know that they have to, Joe.
But have we issued a certificate of appropriateness
No,
for
we
the
have not.
project?
No.
We have not.
We have not.
And I think for us, our conundrum here is for us to comply with the historic preservation ordinance, then we have to vote whether we're going to issue a certificate of appropriateness. We keep calling it approval, it's appropriateness. I don't think there's any question that overall the project is appropriate for the historic district. I've seen what the gazebos look like that are going in. I think they're appropriate. There is also a provision in the ordinance that discourages trying to make new construction look like old construction. And I think a lot of people get hung up on that. But the ordinance says just because it's new construction, just because it's in the historic district, although it needs to blend in, it's actually discouraged to try to make something look like it was built in 1910 or 1902 or 1889. So I think we're within our authority under the ordinance to issue a certificate of appropriateness. I also believe that if Mr. Chappell wants to make the motion that we make that certificate contingent on something, I think we're within our authority to do that. However, we also realize, as has already been stated, there is still a right of appeal to the city council and we haven't even voted on the motion, but assuming that that motion is approved, then it can still be appealed to city council. They can overrule us, but at least then we've all followed the procedures of what we're supposed to do. I haven't even heard, we haven't even voted on the motion, so I don't know if that's what's going to be before us or if that's what we're going to do.
Well, to Leroy, to address what you brought up, is the reason why the process has worked the way it always has is so that HP is not designing or redesigning. We are offering suggestions before things are designed, and that's why always in the past a plan is made, and then we are allowed to give our suggestions, to ask questions, and that way there's plenty of time for any adjustments to be made, and without voiding any contracts already made with contractors. So this is the point of why this project became contentious in the first place, is because we weren't allowed to ask questions and be a part of the conversation long before now. But I'm sorry, because our authority comes from the National Park Service, and the National Park Service guidelines is what we are supposed to be very knowledgeable on and trained on, and to be able to bring to the conversation in all of these things.
And also, I understand that the city already followed some recommendations when we asked that they consult with Joe Coffin, and I cannot overstate how appreciative I am of the concessions and the changes that were made along the lines there. And beyond that.
You know, and as I've definitely been on the record about protecting, you know, the trees in the park, and one less gazebo in the center of that park and one less strip of concrete is, to me, very important. And, you know, in looking over our ordinance, in Section 6 of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, the powers and duties of our commission are to regulate new construction within a historic district and exterior alterations to landmarks, landmark sites, and properties within the defined historic district in the manner described herein, and it's to regulate the design and the placement of all permanent signs within the historic district, to recommend to council specific guidelines to use in making decisions for approval, and even going as far, and I'm certainly not suggesting this, nor would I, to recommend to the city manager to direct staff to stop work on projects that do not have proper authorization by the commission or do not conform to the conditions of issued certificates of appropriateness. And we have not issued a certificate of appropriateness for the plan. It's certainly under project. I don't see how moving a gazebo would affect the scope of this project and reducing the amount of damage to the trees and the green space in the park. My motion would be that a recommendation only, and city staff could take this to the council, and they could overrule us.
So your motion was to approve the modification, moving the middle gazebo to the west side of the park and removing the immediate concrete sidewalk going to that gazebo.
That's correct.
Okay.
And before we vote on that, in looking at the scope of our authority, and this is just my opinion, but I'm also just one vote, I think the plan as submitted meets the requirements, and I think this is something we should approve. That's just my opinion. We do have a motion on the floor.
We haven't got a second
We
yet.
do not have a second.
I second it.
Okay. You want to call for the vote on that? Before we vote, anybody else have any discussion? I don't want to stop anybody from speaking that wants to speak on this. Anybody else?
Oh, I have one other thing.
Okay.
Mention that. But I imagine that there are going to be other amenities in the park. There will be signage. Will there be signage in the park?
Your handicap signage, would be minimal.
So just handicap signage, there's not going to be any other historic signage or recognition of the grant or?
It's already in place. We're held bound to a specific sign that they give us, and it's already in place. It's a little 12 by 12, land and water conservation sign.
Okay.
And if Mr. Mayor gets his way on the next proposal, then there'll be another sign in there as well.
Okay. So we need to
Any other discussion? Call the.
And one question, would James, would you like the stamped concrete to be part of the?
We already have a motion, we need to vote.
Okay.
You have to vote, yeah.
Okay. All right, I made my motion, we got a second.
Can you, Dan, can you read back what his motion was?
The motion is to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the proposed plan with basically the recommendation of moving the middle gazebo to the west side, as well as eliminating the sidewalk area that was in and around that gazebo.
So you're looking at removing
Oh,
that
yeah, no, I
sidewalk?
know, I just want to make sure
Okay,
what was put in the record is what we're voting on.
okay.
All right. Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Valerie Duncan,
Yes.
Adam Robb,
Yes.
Joe Chappell,
Yeah.
Lynn Bilodeau.
You're gonna make me do it? No?
Okay, 4-1.
Okay.
Moving on.
Next agenda item, discussion potential action on a request for certificate of appropriateness for a Murrah bombing memorial tree and plaque in Mineral Wells Park. Mr. Mayor?
Fine. I'm Steve Getling, 809 Westlake Road. In January, I got a call from the National Memorial Foundation. And the call was, to me as the mayor, whether I would be willing to do a proclamation concerning the Murrah bombing, since this is the 25th anniversary, April 19th. This is 25th anniversary. And they said, and I said, sure. They said, did you realize that there were 6 citizens of Guthrie that died in that bombing? And I was embarrassed to say, no, I was not aware of that. I said, I'd sure like to know who the names were. And so they sent me a letter with the names. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, I think that we ought to do more than just a proclamation. I think we ought to do some kind of a memorial, if you will, here in Guthrie, especially since we had 6 citizens that perished. And then the letter that they sent me, they said, oh, by the way, there was also 19 first responders, firemen, from the Guthrie Fire Department that responded to the site. And so I was thinking about how we might do something more than just the proclamation. An idea of some kind of a memorial came to mind, and initial thought was some kind of a living memorial, tree. And then that morphed into, well, we need to have some identifier as to why this is a living memorial, to who and to recognize whom. So I came on about an idea of some type of a stone that would be placed close to the tree. As my mind kept working, I thought I need to involve some civic organization possibly with this, and thought that maybe the Ministerial Alliance would be a good place to start. So I called the chair of the Ministerial Alliance, which happens to be Robbie Fields, and whose mother died. His mother is Chip Fields, it's listed there, died in the bombing, and I was not aware of that. And I was doing this as a private citizen, and asked Ronnie if he would take it to the Ministerial Alliance and see what they thought about the possibility, and if they would be involved with some kind of a ceremony that we might do. And he got back with me with the affirmative. And so then, how do we make this happen? And I put on something that I hate to do, which is a fundraiser hat. And I just hate to do this, but I was very fortunate to find donors in our community that would be willing to pay for a granite plaque, if you will, and a tree. We have 8 donors that have stepped forward to do that. Then I went to the city again with my private citizen hat on, and also with some input from Ministerial Alliance about where might this be a good location, and Mineral Wells Park came up. So then I went to the city and said, is there, to Tenny and to Leroy, and said, do you think there might be a possibility? And we kicked around a few ideas, and the west side of the pond there at Mineral Wells seemed to be a good location, especially with future plans that the city has to enhance that side. Leroy suggested that I come before you to make sure that I have your certificate of appropriateness before we went any further. So that's what I'm doing as a private citizen now, as a private citizen, asking, I think you have in front of you both the potential location on the west side of the pond there at Mineral Wells, approximately about halfway down. The granite stone is about 36 inches by 24 inches. It is typical, I guess, cemetery marker color, a gray granite, and names etched in it of both the 6 that perished and the 19 firemen that responded. It would be parallel to the ground, raised approximately 1.5 inches. As I understand it, maybe a little bit of pea gravel around the outside to make it easier to mow around for maintenance purposes. It would be cupped edge granite. It would be slightly on a slight angle so the water would run off it, and be approximately 15 feet from the tree. The tree would be an autumn blaze maple, which grows to be about 45 feet tall and about 35 feet wide. Beautiful coloring in the fall, as the name would imply. Good tree for habitat in Oklahoma. TLC professionals suggested that is probably the best maple type, fast growing, nice color, good shape. So I come to you asking for your consideration about that location, that plaque, that tree.
I just Googled the tree, and it's really pretty.
Red tree, yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Pops.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Gentling?
I got one. I think that's a great tree, but aren't there growth of the actual survivor tree?
I
Did you
talked
look into that?
I talked to the.
I figured you
Yeah,
would.
I talked to the gentleman that called me, who's I guess deputy vice chair of the foundation, and he said that they have taken so many cuts off of the survivor tree, which was just to the north of the Murrah building, that the suggestion is that they don't stress it anymore. So they've really limited it, because they knew that everybody that wanted any kind of memorial, especially in Oklahoma, would want a cutting off of it, and they've just limited it significantly.
I see.
Good point, though, good thought. It would have been great. It would take a long, long time to see it through fruition from a little cutting, but anyway, I did inquire.
Maybe someday.
Yeah,
We
someday.
We could add 2 on either side or
Yeah.
something.
Well, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. I don't think there's really anybody in Oklahoma that wasn't affected by that day in some capacity, so I would love to see this happen. So I'm going to make a motion to approve.
I will say I appreciate you running around getting donations or trying to find investors.
Thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Vote.
Valerie Duncan,
Yes.
Joe Chappell,
Yeah.
Adam Roth,
Yes.
Aaron Brown,
Yes.
Lynn Bilodeau,
Yes.
5-0.
Thank you, sir.
Item 6, report on the administrative approval of color selections for the playground equipment and splash pad as a part of Mineral Wells 2018 Land and Water Conservation Fund grant project. And I don't think we have a staff report on this.
No, other than, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I just.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that, just giving an update, there's no action required, it's just an update to give you guys on the, color selection that was selected, in that. But I also wanted to make a point is when we were going through all this, we realized that actually per our current ordinance, staff has the ability to do color selection for anything within the district. So basically, from this point forward, we're going to be looking at administrative approvals for color, but you will also see similar reports come to you on a monthly basis as they come, needed or available, if you want to say, for any of those administrative decisions that have been made. I'd like to also add is that staff has a pretty good idea of what is compatible for the area, what the commission has, so I don't really think there's going to be, or I don't foresee that there would be a whole lot of issue. But anyway, just wanted to point that out as well. So with that, if there's any comments you have, but again, it's an information only, no action required.
Okay.
Not to throw salt in the wound, but I think if you would have came with this when they asked for color selections, that process would have been a lot easier. We could have seen and made color selections as they were chosen versus those color wheels that was brought that were not everything was accurate the last time. Just make a note. I mean, it would have been
Understood.
probably an easier process then, and we wouldn't have
Yeah.
went
And
under.
and my only comment on this would be that I don't know that it, and James, you probably know, being on council, I don't know if our recommendation made it to council that we didn't just decline to choose colors. We deferred to the staff to choose colors, but we also requested that the staff consult with Joe Coffin, the landscape architect, when doing that. And I don't know if that ever made it to city council or
That was
not.
not
If it did, fine. If it didn't,
It wasn't
I just want to
communicated.
duly note it for the record that we still would like his involvement in choosing things like that. None of us on the board are landscape architects.
Yeah, we would have liked to have seen a recommendation from the professional that we could have made a decision on. So,
That would
But-
be my only comment.
I
I
like the natural color scheme. So,
do too.
which is-
I have a question.
what they did.
Obviously, I don't understand how. When I read the ordinance, I don't see how that's relative to staff being to choose colors in the historic district without input from the Historic Preservation Commission.
I mean, it's one of those things, if you guys want to amend the ordinance, you can do
Well, I don't think
accordingly.
it's
I'm just trying to, like everything I've been doing since I've been here, is trying to have consistency and more importantly, implementing the code and the code as it was written. So it's one of those things, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it in all aspects, not just pick and choose different areas.
I think he's asking where in the ordinance does,
Oh, I put it in the staff report. It's section 10, under, approval required by city, or approval, review required by.
But with all due respect, I think section 10 clearly says that you still have to get a certificate of appropriateness.
Oh, they do. They have to put in an application. It has to be
Right.
fully reviewed, and they would be issued a certificate of appropriateness.
Right.
It's just an administrative approval, not a commission approval.
Well, and again, I think that section 10 specifically says, they still have to get that unless it's ordinary maintenance and repair as defined in section 9.
Well, I'll tell you this. I will send it to the city attorney.
Okay.
And have him, and I'll explain to him or what, and have him make a formal determination, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, you sent us out
Applications.
your preservation ordinance overview.
Yes.
You supplied us with what doesn't need a certificate of appropriateness, with his ordinary maintenance and repair, any work for which a building permit or any other city permit or certificate is not required, where the purpose of the work is stabilization, and further, where the work will not noticeably change the exterior appearance of the resource. Any work not satisfying all of the above requirements shall be considered ordinary maintenance and repair. Wouldn't need a certificate of approval. But any construction or change of the exterior of a building, an object, or a site or structure, for buildings, objects, sites, or structures, alteration shall include, but is not limited to, the changing of roofing or siding materials, changing elements or adding doors, door frames, windows, window frame shutters, fences, railings, porches, signs, or any ornamentation. That requires a certificate of approval.
No, right. I'm
So,
not saying that a
and I-
certificate of appropriateness isn't required. It is required. What I'm saying is, per the ordinance, that certificate of appropriateness can be approved administratively.
I just don't
Well,
see that anywhere.
And go ahead and ask
Yeah,
ask
and
city
then I'll get
attorney
with
for
you.
clarification, but I think the second sentence in section 10 references the first sentence. In other words, if it is regular maintenance, that's when it can be
Administratively approved. But if it's
Instead of,
something
but if
new,
it's something new,
it can't be.
then I don't think it can. But you can ask city attorney for clarification on that.
Then I
But
get,
appreciate
yeah,
that.
I mean, the only thing I would say is then why would there be a need to reference the need to bring administrative approvals back to the commission if you're saying there's no administrative approvals or there's no ability to provide administrative approvals?
No, they can do it, and they're just reporting, this building needed regular maintenance. It already had green paint on it. They scraped it off and put more green paint the same color on it.
Okay.
Just to let us know why that was done
So
and
let
why
us
they
know.
didn't
That would
request
be
it.
administrative approval, but
Then that would
any
be
new
fine.
things, any construction, any new items need a certificate of approval.
Okay.
As
But I
read
think
it.
if we go any farther on this, we're beating a dead horse.
Yes,
'Cause you've already,
I understood.
Okay.
I'll have an interpretation done.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
Any other staff comments?
None.
I don't even know what we're
Commissioner
originally talking
comments.
about. I forgot what we were even originally
Okay.
talking about. This is like so.
Section 10 in the ordinance.
Okay,
I'll
all
go
right.
over it
The
with you.
colors, yeah.
Any commissioner comments? We are adjourned. Thank you.